2 years ago I made this video comparing the price of similar shopping baskets from supermarkets near me. Now after those 2 years, during which the UK has left the European Union, and of course also during which the pandemic has been playing out almost the whole time, I thought it might be interesting to repeat that shopping comparison and see what's changed. So the shopping list is going to be very similar to last time, and it is a bit of a weird list. It comprises some very cheap basic cupboard ingredients which I will buy from each shop, and it's weird and basic because it was prescribed by a food bank. On top of this, the list includes a small range of basic perishables. These, in order to avoid waste, I will not buy. I'll just spot and record the prices. So this is the list. Let's go shopping, and then over the top of that I'll explain some of the rationale and methodology as well as answer one or two frequently asked questions. Now I should say before we start that you don't need to correct my pronunciation of Lidl or Aldi. I'm aware that those stores pronounce their own names differently in other parts of the world, but here in the UK I'm using the pronunciation that those companies have chosen themselves for their TV advertising. As before, I'm going to try to find the lowest priced example of each listed item in each shop. Essentially, I'll try to leave each place with more or less the same bag of shopping. I'm not going to try to find like brands in every store because actually that's probably impossible. I will have to apply judgment and discretion. For example, if an item is out of stock or otherwise unavailable in one place, I'm not coming home empty-handed. I'm going to look around for what I consider to be the closest alternative that isn't a downgrade. So if I can avoid it, none of the shopping bags will be missing any item, or at least its reasonably close equivalent. This does mean that an empty shelf of the cheapest example of a non-perishable will count against that store, as I'll probably be buying the next item up. But that just reflects whatever is the reality on the day I visit. This was a key factor in Lidl's placement on the previous video, and lots of people told me I'd bought the most expensive kind of jam. The fact is, that's all they had. There wasn't even an empty shelf space for the cheaper jam, and I bought what was available, which is all I can do in a test like this. But similarly, if something's on special offer, that is price down labelling on the shelf edge, I'm not talking about reduced sticker items about to expire. I will take advantage of such offers if they're there. This may create an advantage for some stores perhaps, but it is just a reflection of the reality of products and pricing when I visit. But at the same time, I'm not going to buy things in massive bulk anywhere to get the cheapest possible price per gram or milliliter. So for example, if somewhere is doing a deal where their cheapest soup is only cheapest if you buy a flat of 12 cans, I'm not going to get that. If for no other reason than it would turn the standardised shopping bag into 2 bags. I'm not carrying 2 bags out of any store. In the last video, I didn't buy tuna in brine because I considered it a downgrade from tuna in oil. Because the oil is food, many people throw it away, but it can be used to make a really tasty dressing for a salad to go with your tuna. However, this time I will buy the cheapest tuna chunks or steak in brine, water or oil, not tuna flakes as those are very poor value. And I will normalise the costs based on drained weight of tuna. Now, the original video was related to the question of whether my limited budget challenge videos would have been easier if I'd shopped in Lidl or Aldi. Spoilers, not really. Lidl, Aldi, Tesco and Asda all came out more or less equal, and the latter 2 of those 4 typically have more choices of products with smallish prices, and greater choice makes for more options in a limited budget challenge. There are a few things people really didn't like about the previous exercise. One of them was that I pretty much ignored pack weights and sizes, and I just ranked the stores based on the raw total of shopping. There was a reason for that. It was because the objective was more about what does it cost to put, for example, bread and jam on the table. That is, what's the cost difference between having no bread and no jam and having some bread and some jam. However, this time, as I also want to look at the general costs of things 2 years later, I will compare the raw total prices, and then I'll also normalise the prices by cost per unit weight or volume, and make comparisons on that basis too, which might be interesting. I made no comparison of the quality of the different products from different places last time, and I still won't do that this time, for 2 reasons. Firstly, any such comparison would only be my subjective opinion, which I'm sure most of you trust beyond reproach, but I don't think it would be all that valuable as a test. Secondly, and most importantly, opening a dozen tins of beans, a dozen packets of biscuits, a dozen jars of jam, and so on would inevitably result in a lot of waste, and I don't like waste. So over the course of a couple of days, I'll go around all of the supermarkets in my local vicinity, and this time I'll include some of the stores that I omitted from the previous video, including Iceland, Farm Foods, Pound Stretcher, and maybe Poundland, although I don't really think Poundland is a supermarket. I'm not going to try to include corner shops and small convenience stores. I know Co-op has lots of those, but I'll be visiting a larger Co-op that I think fully qualifies as a supermarket. Budgeon's used to be a full-fledged supermarket chain, but as far as I can tell, they've shed their larger supermarkets and now they're more like convenience stores. I had to draw the line somewhere, and that's where I drew it. What else might you want to know? Digestive biscuits are a kind of wholemeal biscuit, and that's biscuit in the English sense. Google is your friend if that's still unclear. The coin deposit system for trolleys at supermarkets continues to confuse some people. It's to discourage people from wheeling them off site or leaving them strewn across the car park. When you chain the trolley back up in the shed, you get your coin back. I use a token that I keep on my car keys, which is the same size as the required pound coin. And the advantage of using that instead of a coin is I can't accidentally spend the token, so I always have it handy. If you don't see a store chain you're familiar with in your locality, it's probably because it doesn't exist in my area. A lot of people have commented on my videos to tell me that produce is cheaper if bought loose. That might be true where you are, but in most cases here, the cheapest fresh produce is bagged. Often because it's the misshapen vegetables. Supermarkets used to reject these in favour of perfectly uniform and unblemished specimens, but they've started to offer these imperfect produce items in bags, typically a kilo or more of the same item, and usually priced lower than loose or any other bagged example of the same product. I'm disregarding any bulk bags of produce that are greater than 3 kilos in weight, even if it's better value per unit weight to buy the big one. For the same reason as I mentioned before, I'm shooting for what I think is a standardised shopping bag that somebody could reasonably carry, and although a 10 kilo bag of potatoes might be great value, it kind of overturns the idea of carrying it home in bags. After I'd completed all of the shopping, I bashed the numbers into a spreadsheet so I can process them. I've recorded all of the pack weights and volumes so I can calculate the normalised prices and applied conditional formatting on each row, so the cheapest example of an item is dark green and the most expensive is red. Just to note, if anybody's scrutinising this closely, the formatting is just per row, because it's simply not useful to use colour to indicate that a jar of jam in one store is cheaper than a loaf of bread in a different store. There is a fair bit of data here. I have double and triple checked it, but I'm not daft enough to imagine I'm perfect, so if it turns out I've made a mistake somewhere, I'll correct it in a pinned comment. Please check for that first if you think you've spotted an error. And here are the results. Even with minimal ordering of the columns, you can see there's a very sharp division between these 6 supermarkets and all the rest. And that distinction shows regardless of whether we're looking at the raw or normalised prices. Before we go through the totals and ranking, let's have a quick look at some of the non-perishable shopping. Okay, that's Poundland. Pound Stretcher was a complete bust, really. I only really managed to get a few of the items in Pound Stretcher, so I'm disqualifying them completely from the running. I managed to get a tin of soup, a tin of tomatoes, a cup of soup, some baked beans, some tuna, flakes and chunks. That's interesting. That's all they had. And so that's literally all they had out of my list, was just a few tins. So Pound Stretcher is disqualified from the running. They did have this though, which I thought was interesting. Nothing to do with the current challenge, but hot dogs beef flavoured from mechanically separated chicken and calf's lungs. Sounds delicious, doesn't it? Coming up soon on Weird Stuff in a Can. I mean, hot dogs, but honestly described. Okay, that's all of them. Let's just get that a little bit tidied up and then we'll talk it through. So there it all is. And I think probably the thing to note about this shopping experiment is the shopping baskets that we've ended up with are more alike than they are different. I think it's fair to say that even though there are different pack sizes and so on, it all kind of evens out when you do a basket full of shopping. There are some anomalies. For example, Farm Foods and Home Bargains only had the big twin packs of digestives, so that would have scored against them because there's 800 grams of digestives in there versus Poundland only has 300 gram packs. There are a few anomalies like that, and for example Co-op only had these kind of plastic pots of rice pudding instead of the tin that everybody else had. Oh, actually no, Poundland only had a tub as well, but same size as a tin. Some of the shops only had the little 3 packs of tuna. Iceland and Home Bargains only had the little 3 packs of individual portions of tuna. Some of the shops had the whole and skimmed and semi-skimmed UHT milk the same price. Others, it was only the skimmed milk that was the cheapest, so there is a bit of a variance there. So for M&S, whole milk was the same price as skimmed and semi-skimmed. Same for Co-op. I think that's it. Some of the others, semi-skimmed was the same price as skimmed. There's not really a lot of kind of anomalies here. So Farm Foods only had tiny little jars of jam. Home Bargains had various different sizes of jam, but actually some of the more expensive things, like Rose's Lime Marmalade, were the same price as the more basic jars of jam. So B&M and Home Bargains tend to have the brands that people are looking for, and obviously they don't have house brands because they're not that kind of a supermarket. As a bunch of shopping baskets, they are significantly similar. I did find this time, this is the cheaper 59p jam, and if you look at that's Co-op's Honest Value strawberry jam. I suspect a lot of these mainstream supermarket jams are made in the same factory with just different labels slapped on the jar, because you can see that that's the same lid on there. And even that one, which is Aldi, they've just put a nicer looking label on there and a different lid. I think I will do a quick comparison of, I don't know, 4 or 5 examples of jam. We'll do a comparison of the ingredients. And really, apart from that, much of a muchness. Iceland didn't have any kind of cuppa soups in boxes, so I had to get these mugshot sachets, which counted against them. I think they were 50p each, those sachets, so that was a bit of a hit against their favour. But Iceland, this is not, none of this is their speciality anyway. Obviously, they're just frozen foods, really, Iceland. So that's all of the shopping, and I think there's probably not very much more to say about that. I'm not going to taste it all for quality, because that would mean opening everything and wasting lots of things. So we can't do comparative taste tests, but I will do a quick ingredients comparison panel for, I don't know, let's say baked beans and jam. Now it's time to have a look at the ranking of stores for non-perishable items based on the raw price of the bag of shopping, regardless of pack sizes. This comparison is most relevant to the limited budget challenges, where it's often more important to get maximum variety under a specific price than it is to get maximum amount of product for the money. In this ranking, Morrisons and Tesco take joint first place, with Aldi falling behind them by only 1 penny. Then Asda, Lidl and Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's is now matching a lot of Aldi prices for basic items, and this shows. A few years ago, Sainsbury's would not have been in the same cluster as these other supermarkets, although they're still more than £1 greater in raw price than the winner. Then it's a jump followed by a steeper climb through B&M, Waitrose, Co-op, Home Bargains and M&S, then another jump to a third tier containing Farm Foods, Poundland and Iceland. Kind of unsurprising that Farm Foods and Iceland are both up there, since they both specialise in frozen foods, not groceries, whereas Poundland's speciality is having tidy price points. So it's not at all uncommon for Poundland to sort of round up their prices to what looks neat. When we compare the total normalised price for non-perishables, Aldi takes the lead, with Tesco in second place by 3p, then Morrisons by another 5p, then Asda, Lidl and Sainsbury's. Again, Sainsbury's is almost £1 dearer than the winner, Aldi, despite those price matches. Then there's a significant hike to a steeper climb through B&M, Co-op, Waitrose, Farm Foods, M&S, Poundland, Home Bargains, and again, Iceland is significantly the most expensive. Moving on to perishables, and for this one 3 stores have to drop out: B&M, Farm Foods and Poundland, simply because they did not carry a full enough range. All of them had something, but none of them had enough to completely cover my perishable shopping list. Here, Tesco takes the lead by more than 20p, and that pattern continues in almost linear fashion through Asda, Lidl, Aldi, Sainsbury's, Home Bargains and Morrisons. Home Bargains is a bit of a surprise there, but they just happen to have the things my list called for. And Morrisons, whilst it has a lot more choice generally of produce and fresh foods, didn't do so well on the day I visited. I know, for example, they were out of their wonky onions, and this probably made the difference. Then again, a hike and a steep climb through Co-op, Waitrose, Iceland, with M&S costing more than double the price of the Tesco perishables list. After normalising the prices, Tesco is still in the lead, and this time by 41p over Lidl. Looking at the detailed data, this comes down to 2 factors. Firstly, on many of the basics, Tesco is matching prices, and on some of the products, Tesco has their perfectly imperfect range of misshapen vegetables that are perfectly good but don't meet the uniformity standards that supermarkets used to insist on. Anyway, for the normalised non-perishables, it's a smooth curve upward through Asda, Morrisons, Aldi, Home Bargains and Sainsbury's. Then a bit of a jump to a steeper climb for Co-op, Waitrose, M&S, and again with Iceland coming in significantly in last place, but again maybe not surprising. They specialise in frozen food and neither part of my shopping list was that. Some of you will have no doubt added up these numbers in your head already, but before we get to the grand totals, a few observations about the stores and supermarkets I visited. I feel like I want to say there are several different styles of shop here, although the differences are sort of subtle and elusive, and I might even be imagining them, so let's take a look. Firstly, there's the standard UK-style supermarket: Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrisons, Co-op, Marks & Spencer, Waitrose, with a mixture of chillers, shelves, and often with bakery, delicatessen and other counters, where you can ask for exactly what you need and have it measured and wrapped to order. Next, the German style: Aldi and Lidl, similar to other supermarkets, but usually just pre-packaged and pre-weighed items, often with the products being displayed in their shipping cartons on the shelves or stacked on the pallets they were shipped on. The Aldi store I visited had one of the longest conveyor belts I've ever seen. Both Aldi and Lidl prefer you to stack your shopping back into the trolley, then take it over to a shelf near the window to pack your bags for carrying home. Most people here seem to ignore this and pack it as it's scanned. Then there's the kind of discount store style: Home Bargains, B&M, Poundland. Now, at their essence, nearly every store I've visited might seem very similar to all the others, just rows of shelves really, Except what differentiates this group is the shelf edge labelling, very busy trying to persuade you that everything you see is an amazing bargain deal. And then the freezer stores, Iceland and Farm Foods, almost identical in their very cramped layout, where there's almost a one-way system that compels you to make a full circuit of every aisle before you get to the checkout. Rows of chest freezers with shelves above them carrying products that don't require freezing or chilling. So that's what the stores look like, and let's have a look at the total prices now. Raw total first. Tesco's in the lead by 74 pence, then Asda, Lidl, Aldi, Morrisons and Sainsbury's, with a span of nearly £4 price difference across those 6 stores. Then there's a little cluster of Home Bargains, Waitrose and Co-op, and then M&S and Iceland right at the top. And then finally the normalised grand totals adjusted for pack weights and measures, and of course necessarily still excluding the 3 shops that didn't have a full range of perishable foods. The ranking is Tesco leading by 63 pence over Asda, then Lidl, Morrisons, Aldi and Sainsbury's. I would say these stores form a sort of competing group, albeit with a few pounds difference between Tesco and Sainsbury's. Then it's all uphill through Home Bargains, Co-op, Waitrose and M&S, with Iceland coming in as the most expensive in test, more than 3 times the normalised price of Tesco. Again, probably not something I should really fault them on, since their speciality is frozen food. And there it is, and I imagine there will already be people furiously typing out angry comments about how I'm wrong, so let's take a few moments to figure out why that might be. Firstly, my shopping list is a very limited one. It doesn't include any frozen food or cheese, not very much fresh meat, no coffee or tea, no toiletries or household cleaning products, no wine or beer, no snacks or sweets. From experience, I do know that some of the supermarkets that people often think of as cheaper do have more competitive prices on some of those item types. So which store works out cheapest for you can be swung quite heavily on the composition of your shopping list. My shopping list here arose out of specific circumstances, so it is what it is. Nextly, if your experience is in comparing the small convenience store version of one supermarket, for example Tesco Express or Morrisons Daily, with Lidl or Aldi, who pretty much only have large stores, the product selection available in those stores will have been a factor. Tesco Express tends to carry branded products, not the house brand, and in some cases the pricing of even those branded products is adjusted upwards in the convenience store version of the shop. Furthermore, preference for brands may be a factor. I scoured each shop to the best of my ability for the cheapest example of the product type in each place. But for some people it has to be Heinz beans and it has to be real Kellogg's Cheerios, and when those constraints are in place, a completely different ranking might emerge. People did tell me on the last video that they thought I should have compared like brands in all of the stores, but it's really difficult to do that, perhaps impossible, since not every store is guaranteed to carry the same selection of brands, and I might not discover this until I'm 3/4 of the way through shopping. Moreover, supermarkets engage in price matching on easily searched basics such as baked beans and tinned tomatoes, and they've done this for years. More recently, Tesco and Sainsbury's have started explicitly labelling the products they price match in this way, but this can be misleading on either direction. On the non-matched products, Tesco and Sainsbury's give you no indication of comparison to Aldi. Sometimes they're actually cheaper, sometimes not. Finally, your views may have been somewhat influenced by advertising. Supermarkets like to do the comparison shopping basket thing themselves, and those that do always have a way of tweaking it so it makes them look good, either by cherry-picking the products they happen to know are cheaper in their own store, maybe sometimes even temporarily altering the prices for the duration of comparison and calling that a special offer, or by presenting price comparisons that are not like for like. Both Aldi and Lidl have been in trouble with advertising standard more than once for misleading comparisons between a house brand in their own stores against a famous brand elsewhere, even when they and their competitors both have the famous brand and both have house brands. Either of which would have been a more honest like-for-like comparison. And to wrap up, we need to have a quick look at how things have changed in the 2 years since I last did this exercise. I think a lot of people may be expecting prices to have doubled, but in reality they're pretty stable, at least for this small and strange selection. The Aldi basket has gone up, and Home Bargains and M&S. Nearly all of the others have gone down a bit, and that's a surprise. Although that might just be because of the minor adjustments I made to a few of the items on the list, for example tuna in water rather than tuna in more expensive oil. So what did that all prove? Well, nothing much really, but I think it has been interesting to repeat this comparison shop. Maybe I'll do a direct comparison on some other smaller category of products next time, such as meat or cheese or frozen pizzas. If you've got ideas or suggestions about that, please let me know in the comments. I hope that was interesting, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.